So, good morning and welcome to BKB's second webinar, this time entitled Back into the Workplace. This webinar has really been created because of the change in rules that are supposed to come in on the 21st of June. And obviously people are talking about bringing staff back into the office. We've got a few housekeeping things to do first off. Firstly, if you've got any questions, can you just leave them to the end or put them in the chat? There's a group chat button at the bottom, and if you could just put any questions in there, that would be great. If you're watching the recording, then obviously don't post any questions, you'll have to email us direct. So a little bit about BKB, for those of you that don't know, we've got a firm of accountants based in Poole. We've got 3 offices in total in and around Poole. Luke and I head up the Poole office. We've built the business from absolutely zero to where we are now, and we like to consider that we kind of give a different approach to mainstream accountants, and we've got a very good client retention rate, which speaks for itself really. We also have the same problems that many businesses also find, is that come the 21st of June, the offices are due to open again. So we're sat here asking ourselves the same questions and some of the challenges that we've noticed. Some of you may have kept your offices open so that people can work in the office and a change of scenery from working at home without necessarily forcing your staff to come into the office, but it offers them an alternative place to work should they want to, and you can maintain social distancing rules, obviously. So now we have these challenges where some of the staff haven't set foot in the office for nearly 14, 15 months, and we've got other staff that have been in the office for 14 or 15 months, and Luke and I have both noticed that there's been challenges around that, with some of the mental issues, which are predominantly the mental issues that we've encountered, and we know that we're going to have to deal with where you've potentially got staff who haven't been working, who maybe feel a bit nervous about coming back into the office, and how is it? What have you as a boss, as an employer, what have you done to ensure that you're COVID secure? And you've got the challenges of staff who have been in the office, who have got very used to all the extra space that's been in the office, and maybe there may be an element of resentment about people coming back and invading that space. So there's lots of things to take into consideration. Tom is somebody that we've worked with for many years now. He's been a great help to us and our clients as well. He's always there on the end of a phone, and if he's not there, his team is there supporting him. Luke and I can't recommend Tom enough, really. So without further ado, I will hand over to Tom and let Tom carry on.
Thank you, Ali. That's really kind. That's a nice introduction. It's always nice to have your own trumpet blown by someone else, so much appreciated. Thank you. Just a little bit about us, for those that don't know. We provide outsourced HR to SMEs. It's what we love doing. It's what we want to help and support and deal with businesses that might face different HR challenges, whether it's taking on their first employee, through to businesses that are growing, comes with different excitements and issues as part of that. I think we can safely say, both from an accountancy and tax perspective and an HR perspective, our shared experience this year of dealing, and last year, of dealing with everything that's come from running the business has helped probably bring us closer together as suppliers, customers, and I guess partners in dealing with the different issues that come up, both in the accountancy and the HR world. And wow, what a year it's been. And running your own HR business has certainly brought its own challenges in terms of everyone has needed HR advice, and the same with running an accountancy. Everyone's needed accountancy advice. So quite an interesting year, but that's us, and always happy to have a chat with anyone about any HR or people issues, as we say, as part of that. So today we're obviously going to start with the whole identity of getting people back into the office safely and securely. I did want to put a picture here of Dame Vera Ling singing When Will I See You Again, but I then thought I'd probably have to start to sing, and some people may not also get the reference to Dame Vera Lynn either. Perhaps that shows my age from that perspective as well. But look, getting people back into the office is going to have its own unique challenges across every different business, and that comes from both the amount of people that someone's looking to bring back into the office, but also so many different range of issues, like Alice has said, from just safety, from an employee or employee perspective, to someone just being genuinely excited to return, through to that change in routine. I think the idea of the working from home message is still in force. Obviously, it says where possible people can still work from home, though the difference being is that obviously from March the 29th, it then didn't become illegal to effectively leave your home to go to an office. So we're in a different territory. We're all obviously waiting, or that we penciled in stage 4 of the roadmap for the 21st of June, potentially changing this advice. But we'll perhaps go through that as we go through the slides as to some of the challenges that may bring. But the whole idea here is to give insight, tips, discussion about when people do come back into the office, some of the things that we need to consider as part of that basis as well. So from today, we just want to get a few outcomes for you. And the first one being is talking about the importance still of having those COVID-19 secure protocols. I think when and if all the restrictions are still lifted, it's still going to come with its challenges. COVID's still going to be around, and we need to look at your duty of care as an employer, as what you should be doing to minimise and reduce the effects of COVID in the workplace. So it is a continual assessment. One of the more trickier ones I think we're all going to identify is how to communicate and engage in open and frank conversations with concerned employees about actually bringing them back in to the workplace. Are there other ideas of short-term flexibility and different adaptations that you might be able to put in place to help people return as well? The key buzzword at the moment, hybrid working, or a new way of working. I think if you turn on the radio, you look at BBC News, you look at all the other websites that are there, I can't remember of a time in the past couple of weeks where I've not seen articles or hearing things about hybrid working. And the same with also people saying, no, it will go back to 5 days a week, people being in the office, through to no, this is going to be completely different going forward. So I've got a few stats and figures for that as well. Going to talk about how to handle flexible working requests. An important part of a right of an employee is to be able to request, and I repeat that word, request, flexible working. And given the changes that have happened over the last year and I guess nearly a year and a half, people will be re-examining what they want to do as part of their working requirements. So we've got that as well. And finally, really just trying to look at how we can welcome staff back, but safely as well, and just the important processes that are going to go with that as part of it. So we're going to start with a few approaches to just think about how you can actually lay out the return for someone to come back. And the key here, I really do think, is about planning ahead. And I've approached this when talking to other clients about it with realistically these very simple maxims, because it's a good approach for you to then be able to lay out the return so you have a process and are able to communicate it. We know that obviously we're still waiting on that final government guidance as to the lifting of social distancing and all the things associated with that. But obviously it may be that you're championing for the bit to hear when that will end so that everyone can return, or we've got other clients that are making other decisions to say, actually, we won't be inviting people back into the office until sometime like August or September, when they believe that the majority of staff may have been or had the opportunity to be vaccinated, or waiting for the summer holidays to end. So it's quite key to think about actually what's going to suit your business. There's not going to be a one-size-fits-all model, but knowing when you need everyone back, or partly everyone back, and we'll talk about that, is going to be key in being able to communicate to people and plan ahead what's going to happen. The how part of this is probably quite interesting, is the actual working model that you are going to put in place. I guess that could be anything from asking everyone back all at once, staggered, changing the actual working model, anything in terms of hybrid as well. Maybe even just how you're going to squeeze everyone in, especially if obviously if social distancing is to be maintained as part of that. A really interesting point that Alistair made in the beginning about some people being in the office and some people not. You know, there could obviously be a system where there's almost like a two-tier workforce, people that will work from home and people that won't work from home. And that comes with its challenges, so we want to explore that as part of it. But you need to be clear about who should be returning to the workplace as well. What's going to be about the adaptations and the changes and support that you may wish to make as part of that process. And I guess being able to plan ahead, you need to know the why. Why do you need everyone back? Because I think one of the resistances that people will face when trying to get people back into the workplace, especially for people who have enjoyed and want to work perhaps from home or some form of different working over that period of time, is having a very, very clear message as to why you actually need people back in the workplace. That could be around business growth, that could be around survival for some businesses, it could be about team working. And I know something that we've discussed in the past with different clients and also with BKB. The training of people is really, really key. Remote learning is a lot more difficult when you've got people who are looking to be trained and have that experience and support of a mentor. Virtually may not work as well as when someone actually might be physically within an office as well. And the point that I put about everything else and planning ahead, I think we know that this is a big challenge with managing expectation, thinking about the business, thinking about what you need as a business with trying to get everyone back into the office. But I think if you can get a plan together and follow these sort of maxims beforehand, you're more likely to be able to show good and effective leadership in communicating to everyone what your plan actually is. It may obviously make people feel a bit more reassured or a bit more feeling more safe about coming in. You get the opportunity to address issues that people may have or concerns quicker. But also, as well, if you're clear in terms of what your plan is, it obviously may increase the retention of staff as well, who may be unclear or concerned about what they're going to do for coming back in as part of that process. But I think the big sort of elephant in the room here, and also obviously for our purposes of talking about, well, when can people come back, is this lifting of the restrictions under stage 4. As we obviously sit here today on the 10th of June, we wait for next Monday to effectively find out whether those, I guess, final restrictions are lifted. And probably the most that obviously concern in terms of a workplace will be obviously, first of all, the working from home message, but also things around the 2-metre rule, social distancing, etc. As well. I know it's been dubbed Freedom Day, but I think we have to recognise that given the current state of play, it may obviously be that the actual Freedom Day, however we want to define it, might actually be delayed. How long that is, I guess, depends on the next bit about this impact of the current Delta variant and how that's going to affect obviously the wider population as well. And we've been asked a lot of, do we think another lockdown could happen again? Do we think that restrictions aren't going to be lifted? I think the one thing I will take from over the past effectively year and a half is, I'm not an epidemiologist. I've got it wrong before, and the best answer to it is I don't know. So going back to where we were last year with what's effectively furlough to begin with, I don't know. But I do think that it's likely that we're going to have some restrictions in for longer place. And I think one of the easiest things to keep in place is the working from home message, because people have started to get used to it. But well, we'll see. Maybe we do have to play roadmap bingo in the next couple of weeks. But what we must recognise is businesses obviously do need to plan ahead in order to be able to start thinking about how they can actually get people, safely back into the office as well. I think one of the big things that we've obviously discussed with many people over the last year, but also still taking these considerations, is effectively what the work actually has as part of your risk assessments. Now, ultimately, to good qualified health and safety in respect of this is going to be, part of being able to demonstrate your duty of care. But if we go back to actually what is a risk assessment, ultimately, a risk, you are looking and assessing a risk, then looking to mitigate it or eliminate that risk as part of that process. And obviously, as a business, you have that duty of care to undertake this. What's really interesting, I guess, about how COVID has shone this whole spotlight on the processes, these COVID secure protocols, of course, are very, very specific around things that we may not have thought about as much in the past, of things like from anything from, increased cleaning to more hygiene methods, sanitizing, all of these other things that we may not have just been more aware of, has been brought very much to the front and center of mind of dealing with COVID in itself. So my point about having this about these risk assessments here is, I don't think just because if Freedom Day or whenever it does come means that things like social distancing, the 2-meter rule, the face masks, etc., are changed, it doesn't mean that they won't be part of prevalence of our lives going forward. And you need to look at your rules within your business about how that's going to be implemented or how that's going to be changed. So I think the first thing I would do when thinking about having people returning to the office is look very, very closely at what your COVID secure protocols are. Do they need to be reviewed and changed, and do they need to be updated in line with any other guidance and feedback that is given by the government or your relevant bodies to help you make sure that you can demonstrate that it still is obviously a secure place to work. We think it's a really good idea to actually share these with your staff prior to coming back, because they may also highlight some things that you may not have thought about. I can sit here in my business and write a risk assessment, but don't then share it with my staff. First of all, they may pick up on things that haven't happened or things you need to think about, but also as well, they may be part of the action process. If there's a risk assessment that says, well, whose duty is it to carry out? Well, it might be some of the staff's duties to carry out. It might be assigned to people to actually undertake certain things within there. I also think as part of that buy-in from people as well, not just your duty of care, but general reassurance and buy-in, I think if you can demonstrate and show that you've obviously attempted to mitigate or eliminate as much risk within the workplace, especially in association with COVID, you're going to have a lot more buy-in from people. I know we're all human, we're all good employers, but I think it's that idea of being able to demonstrate to people that we're taking every step and precaution that we can, and may obviously allow them to feel a bit more reassured as part of that process. When we're talking about there of ECV, I'm talking about extremely clinically vulnerable people, so people that might suffer from things like autoimmune diseases, things that might have a respiratory effect, and also obviously pregnant members of staff as well. I think you do have to take into a bit more consideration that they may be more vulnerable with being in a workplace, and that additional risk assessments or measures or even discussions with them about their situation should take place, so that people do feel adequately consulted with in respect of that. We should normally do and obviously a risk assessment when someone obviously falls pregnant or is returning from maternity leave. Anyway, there was a requirement with these COVID protocols to do an enhanced pregnancy risk assessment with someone under the protocol. So I actually still think that that's a good thing going forward as well, because obviously in any time there may be more higher risk. So it's worth considering that if you do have any workers that might be defined as extremely clinically vulnerable or maybe pregnant, that you do undertake further assessments with them about returning into the office place and the risks associated with that. On a very genuine level, it's most likely that obviously some form of business insurance that you have, like your public liability, for example, or maybe your employer's liability insurance, will want to have some sort of demonstration that you've undertaken an assessment of risk and have the correct policies and procedures in place for doing it. So it's important that you do think about those risk assessments in returning people to work, because if there ever was an issue in the workplace or a claim, that would probably be the first place that an insurer or a claimant would look, is to say, well, actually, what did you have, funnily enough, written down as part of that process? We'll go on to sort of walk the walk, talk the talk as part of that. But also remember, under health and safety, but also obviously from an employment law perspective, you do have a duty of care for those people returning into the workplace as well. So just be mindful. I think a lot of what we've seen with risk assessments as well has been that it's so unique to your business. There's nothing generic that realistically could be put out there that just says, oh yeah, just fill this out and it'll be fine. That assessment needs to be very specific to your business itself. I think a lot of what we also need to remember is when Freedom Day, so to speak, does arrive, we must still make sure that we're reminding staff that if they do have any symptoms of COVID, that they must immediately self-isolate. They must follow the guidance, and we should be putting reminders out to everyone, and appropriate signage and information to make sure they do that. Because I do as a personal view, think that once all those restrictions are actually lifted, it may go to the back of the mind that a cough, high temperature, fever, etc., a loss of taste and smell, those things aren't in the forefront of the mind, whereas actually someone obviously could have those symptoms and could obviously be very difficult within the workplace as well. So just thinking about some of the things that we've obviously had to come across over the last period of time, but also things going forward. And these are some of the things we discussed. One of the things I was just going to ask Luke and Alistair at BKB was, for you guys, sort of some of those challenges in thinking about your COVID secure protocols. What have been kind of some of the bigger issues that you've had to face when thinking about people actually coming in to the work?
I was going to say client meetings is obviously, it's not just the staff, it's the fact that because we're an office, we have clients who are used to coming into the office as well. And one of the things that we did very early was when we opened up the office to those people that wanted to come in, before we allowed that, we did do a risk assessment, and we circulated that to all the staff. And I was amazed actually, just the level of, and you touched on the reassurance bit, because it gave them a level of reassurance and comfort that we were doing our utmost to make the office as COVID secure as possible. And they did come up with some suggestions that we hadn't, as much as Luke and I can try and come up with everything, you still can't, and you need the feedback from your staff to get them on. It's not just about a case of getting them on board, it's also a case of the fact that they did come up with some legitimate points as well. And the risk assessment was a very interesting thing, but certainly bringing in clients, we had to change some of the processes when clients drop off books and records. We had to identify that. We had to look at, we've got some sanitizer machines both on both floors. Luke, do you want to?
I was going to say, I think from the risk assessment, what came across quite well as well, which was a challenge, is the fact that we have some members of staff that couldn't give a flying monkeys about COVID, that they're not interested and they're not worried about the rules. And then we had the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where people were literally paranoid about touching things in the office. And across a workforce of about 25, I think what we are, that's quite difficult to manage, because people that didn't really care were inadvertently upsetting the people that did care. And we were then trying to balance off and make sure everyone was aware and being comfortable to respect each other. Okay. And one of the things we did bring in quite early on was a wristband system, whereby we had 3 coloured wristbands. One's for those that really didn't care, but they will respect other people. Those that wanted a 2-metre distance kept at all times, and those that wanted a 1-metre distance kept at all times. And what that did is that took the politics out of people saying, oh, do you mind keeping away from me, and all this sort of stuff. And everybody was walking around with the coloured band on, and it just became quite normal then for people to be respected, bearing in mind what their opinion was. But navigating that on a small scale in terms of our business is difficult. I can't imagine the bigger businesses and how they're going to deal with all those sort of things.
It's really interesting, because there was a study done recently of about, I think it's just over 1,000 UK workers, saying that over 3/4 of them felt somewhat or very concerned about COVID if they were asked to return to the office. And 58% of those said that their employers should add hand sanitizers throughout the building to protect them. 48% wanted to see the frequency of workplace cleaning increased. And 47% wanted organisations to limit the number of people visiting the building each day. And I think those are going to be some of the more common things that obviously would come up anyway as part of a risk assessment. But it's interesting that you guys have obviously seen those issues as part of the process. So thank you for that input as well. And I think the points around those risk assessments there, I mean, obviously the same thing about where we currently are. I mean, you know, we've got different clients that insist on people still wearing face masks when moving around different parts of the building. Obviously increased cleaning and hand sanitizer and soap and water. I mean, they're basic things anyway, but I think that is something that can be examined further to say, actually, how are we maintaining a further cleaning regime within the business who's responsible for it, and how are we going to deliver that as part of that process? Two big things that have come up as well has been about ventilation, about having fresh air coming through where possible, I think is important. And also air conditioning just being reset to drawing fresh air in, not just doing recirculation, has been an eye-opener as part of that. Your social distancing measures, they're really interesting in terms of the wristbands and how it's worked really well as well. We touched on earlier about workplace stress and about how people have, you know, trying to adapt and manage in that situation. And we'll get on to maybe a bit of conflict later on with how people are managing that return as well. We've had people obviously start up using QR codes, but providing more information about their own COVID secure protocols. Again, not just saying, well, I've done my risk assessment, here it is. It's actually about communicating that to the staff and allowing them to see that information, allowing them to scrutinise it, give that feedback. And again, comes back to that, how we're planning ahead. That's really, really important information to give to people, so they do feel, first of all, that you do take into account their safety, your safety, and your duties as an employer as well. There is a lot of information on the HSE website, and there are some actual template basic risk assessments that can be used as that starter, but I always say try and get some qualified advice as part of it. And again, coming back to not forgetting where we are in terms of the self-isolation rules, I think what is going to happen obviously going forward is COVID clearly is going to be part of our lives going forward. We've got to be sure that we are re-emphasising, I think, as employers, and I think this is really important, what those self-isolation rules actually are, and continuing to review and update whatever assessments and policies and procedures we actually have in place in the workplace too. And that's really important because, of course, as employers, the duty falls on you to talk the talk and walk the walk. And that's what I'm saying. It's really, really important that as part of your measures in the workplace, you need to be really, really clear about the rules in regards to things like social distancing, face masks, etc. as well. And those risk assessments and communication help you form that as part of your communication strategy to the business. How are you going to enforce them? I think I'm sure everyone's had different experiences of people bending the rules or trying to be closer than they should, etc. I think a quiet word initially is an important way to deal with that, just to be respectful and just say, look, these are the rules going forward, please respect them. If someone fails to follow the rules, then naturally there is that disciplinary process or corrective behaviour to deal with. But I'd always say take advice at that point, because though we've seen a couple of cases already through employment tribunals about people failing to follow reasonable management requests and health and safety processes in regards to COVID protocols, it is always going to come down to the business rules and the business applications of that as well. The point about visitors you had is a really important one as well, because I think a lot of places obviously have shut the doors and no one's allowed in, and it's then become more of a medium like this in terms of Zoom, Teams, etc., which can be fine. However, obviously we all crave human interactivity, and clients sometimes want that face-to-face discussion, because you can see the whites of someone's eyes when you're talking to them, as opposed to just quickly nipping off the screen and going somewhere else. Oh, sorry, my internet connection failed. So we do need to be mindful that people want that interaction. Obviously, the other things that have been discussed, and we've obviously dealt with different clients as well, has been those adaptations that have actually happened in the workplace, from wondering whether there's as many workspaces that are needed for distancing rules, whether they actually need a workplace anymore, in terms of actually saying we've developed this model whereby we want to shrink the offices as well, and the amount of space that we actually need. The numbers of people coming in and out, that's both from obviously an employee and staff perspective through to contractors and visitors. I think that's a really big thing to still consider going forward. Obviously, during the pandemic, we were asked also to change potentially our travelling times between peak hours as well, and that's obviously been one of the challenges. Is that something that might continue as part of it? But again, remembering the hand, space, face, and I think now air rules is, what are you doing in your workplace to ensure that you are helping people maintain that process? Again, it's about you demonstrating that you talk the talk and walk the walk as part of it as well. A lot of this does come down to individual circumstances, and a lot of it is not only just about, of course, trying to do the things about creating a safe working environment, but I think a lot of it is about reassurance, and also then helping people be the most productive that they can be, whether that's by being in the office 5 days a week, slightly less, or a mix of a model as part of that. So again, really, really key that if you are adapting the workplace, or you are changing it as part of that process, that you communicate that to people as to why, and it goes back to that who, how, what, where, why, and when message as part of that checklist to go through. I put in workplace testing because we've been asked about this, and I think I can see it continuing on going forward. The only thing I would say is it is a minefield for a couple of different reasons. If an employer did register before the 12th of April, they can still get free lateral flow tests sent to them as part of that testing of the workforce. But it's kind of one of those things that at the moment the government guidance is only updated up until the 30th of June. So it seems to suggest that actually past the 30th of June, there won't be then any free lateral flow tests available, i.e. you have to buy them. People may have set up their own DIY testing processes. I'll talk about that in a second. People may have now got third-party suppliers actually coming in and doing the testing, or actually for businesses that actually have less than 50 staff. And again, this is at the moment subject to the 30th of June for some particular reason. They can obviously look for staff to go to the community testing process, where you go through the local authority and have 2 lateral flow tests a week. I know it may not be applicable to everyone. I just want to put it out there that workplace testing in the DIY mode can't just be willy-nilly. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. We can't just sort of say, here, have a lateral flow test, take it once a week. The guidance is that if you are creating your own DIY scheme for workplace testing, and again, that might be something in terms of reassurance that they should be done at least twice a week, you need to set up effectively a site to do this. So privacy is a big part of that. And there are requirements as to how you actually store the actual flow tests as well. I would probably, if I'm being completely open, I would leave trying to do workplace testing, because there's so many legal responsibilities that you've got under health and safety, equality laws, data protection, and employment law about actually doing this. If you're thinking about actually putting in a workplace testing regime, I really would come and take some specific advice about doing it. Don't just have a test here and there. There are a lot of requirements in regards to doing effective workplace testing, and it kind of gives me a bit of the shivers, because though I can see trying to do it would give good reassurance to people when you may catch some asymmetric tests, the sort of consequences are that you need a lot of rules with this. It takes up a lot of time. There is paperwork behind it, and you need to set up facilities in order to do this properly. And so I would say it's probably one to leave unless you're think it as part of that process. I also just want to say as well, because we have seen it, that people taking lateral flow tests who then suddenly it then comes back as a positive still need to go and get a PCR test. There is no, this doesn't replace anything that you need to and go to a testing site. And we have had a few instances where people said, well, they've just gone home because they've had a lateral flow test positive. No, they need to go and get a PCR test in line with what the government provides as part of it. So I mention it, but I mention it with intrepidation, if that's okay, because I think it could become a real-time consumer for employers, but actually also not be actually that effective in the fight against things if not done correctly and to all the standards they expect. So if you're thinking about doing workplace testing in order to get people back into the office or reassure them, do really take some specific advice about this as part of that process. So the idea of trying to obviously plan some communication to everyone about coming back in, and this would be something that I'll pick up with BKB as well, is you almost need to enter a bit of a consultation mode and to try and get, you know, the views and concerns or excitement about people coming back into the workplace on a permanent basis. I think the earlier you do this, the better, because obviously, though we're awaiting the data that shows us the date or whenever Freedom Day is, we need to be thinking about the steps that we need to take to return to work, hence the information before. How you actually do this, of course, is either by, you know, having those virtual meetings, you know, maybe have an outdoor meeting with affected people, limit the numbers, send around an email. Gaining staff's views about coming back means that obviously you can address those things. You can listen to any feedback that they're going to give about concerns that they may have in coming back. You can address them with facts. I think that's really important. That's why, you know, making sure that you're up to date with the guidance, ensuring that you've got those risk assessments in place and demonstrated to people means that you can go back to address any concerns with the factual information. Gives people reassurance, which you've talked about throughout this, but also, you know, being clear in terms of following up with people can be a really important part of that communication process. But also, I think, just trying to be a bit human. We know that people are going to have a big routine change when perhaps coming back into work. I mean, that could be everything from having to travel, whether that's plane, train, automobile, tube, bicycle, scooter, walk, is going to be a change in their routine. We know that some people will be anxious about coming back. We know some people will be champing at the bit to come back, but I think we also recognise that balancing some of those things like childcare or care and responsibilities has been positive and negative for people throughout the working from home period. But also got to think about how people are going to actually end up working at work, because that change in social interaction, you know, if you've been working from home for 14 months, you know, you're not actually normally very easily interrupted. You know, you might get a message, you might get a Teams call, you might get a phone call, whereas actually how are people going to react when they're sort of tapped on the shoulder by someone when back in the workplace? That's going to be very strange. You know, people bringing in their packed lunches that stink, you know, egg sandwiches are back in the office. You know, they're all going to be things that start to cause that change in behaviour and routine. Too hot in the office, too cold, they open the window, change the aircon. It all comes back, I'm not saying that office politics, but it all comes back to that management of people. Initially, it's going to be quite a big shock for everyone, I think, both for us as employers, but also for people there. And the one thing I thought about a lot as well is the noise of more people, that chatter, that discussion, that ability for it to not be in a silo sat at home is a big part of how this is obviously going to change in its entirety as well. So just being human and thinking about those things is probably going to be useful, and recognising that everyone will probably have a different view as part of it. So just to be clear, the working from home message that was put in place, obviously at certain points it's been a legal thing, the next thing it's been obviously advisory, is that we have been enforced, or it has been enforced by the government to work at home, therefore it's not been an automatic right. for people who are working from home, unless advised otherwise, it's not been a permanent change to their terms and conditions. It's been something that's obviously been enforced of us as part of that process. And for some people it's been good, for some people it's not been good, for some businesses it's worked, for others it's not. So we're all going through the same challenges that it comes with. And I think most of the feedback that we've had as well with people is that change in routine is going to be one of the bigger issues and one of the bigger drivers. And I think being considerate for that is important, but it's also about those cultural changes as well, of how it's actually worked and operated too. We also know that your model of work, or the way that you work, may have changed as well, again for the better and for the good. And one of the things that certainly has been highlighted from working from home, of course, has been the blurring lines between work and home. People working on longer hours. Some may say that's a good thing in terms of bang for buck. Others may say in terms of fatigue and tiredness, that's been one of the issues as well. But I think there is going to be, for a number of people, that excitement of getting out of their bedroom and actually being at work. But also for others, there's going to be that anxiety of almost like coming back into a crowd. We also have seen, I must admit, where people have then returned to the workplace, there has been a bit more conflict. There has been a bit more underlying deeper issues that have come up. We've also seen where businesses have changed. There's a bit of survivor's guilt. We may have gone through a round of redundancies previously, and people may have left. You go back into a workplace where those people there that weren't there now, there may also be a bit of survivor's guilt as part of that process, and it's sort of going through that as a psychological thing as well. We also know, of course, that there are plenty of people that will want to continue to work from home and see it as why can't I just now not work from home? I'm doing my job effectively. It's worked well, or perceived to work well, for the last 14 months. I want to continue to work from home, boss. And everyone's going to have their own different views on that and whether that's going to work or not. So it's kind of handy, really, that we talk about flexible working. So flexible working is the right to request flexible working actually is triggered after someone has worked for you for 26 weeks. So anyone that has worked for you for 26 weeks can make the right to request flexible working. So what could that be? That could be, I guess in normal times, we might have normally seen it as reducing their hours. So someone going from maybe full-time to part-time, maybe changing to a more flexi-time approach, maybe looking to compress their hours into a working week. But obviously the big one that has come up, of course, is I now want to work from home. So that change in the terms and conditions of employment that would say the base of work is, we're here at Discovery Court, through to actually, I want my base of work to be my home. And that would obviously trigger a right to a request for flexible working. They then obviously, we'd ask them to formalise that as what we call a statutory application, and obviously put down in writing, first of all, what the request is, what impact they think it's going to have, and how it's going to be managed. And I think what's really, really important with these flexible working requests is just don't dismiss them. If someone is making a request to you to change, for example, like their hours, working from home, different patterns of work, different days, get them to formalise it in writing and deal with it as a formal flexible working request. Don't just say, no, we can't do that. If that's the case, of course, you can say yes and it's straightforward, then that's fine, but don't just dismiss it, and I'll explain why. The key here is to openly, with the employee, assess those advantages and disadvantages of any application. You actually do hold effectively a formal meeting with them to discuss the request with the employee, and if we do actually reject it, we offer an appeal process as part of that. What's really interesting about flexible working requests is you actually do have 3 months to deal with the request. Though I've got to be honest, I think in any situation you would always want to probably deal with them quite promptly, both from sort of the employee perspective and the employer perspective. So though you've got that, I would always say deal with a flexible working request as soon as it can go through. As we said, we meet with them, we discuss it. We can discuss things openly. So for example, someone who makes a request to change their place of work to working from home, one of the questions we might obviously think about, especially in situations where there may be caring responsibilities, is how are we going to manage things around, school holidays? How are we going to manage things around working from home? So it's really important that you think about before what some of the challenges might be for them actually working in a different way or how they do it. The discrimination warning comes from the fact that people may obviously have different caring responsibilities, and that's why I'm saying don't just dismiss it, because obviously we fall foul of potentially equality legislation. So if you get someone saying, I want to change certain aspects of the way I work, like I said, hours, place of work, etc., do take advice on dealing with that actual work. And you kind of got three options from it, really. You can say, of course, yes, and agree to the flexible working request. You could trial it and see how it goes. You can do it for a trial period and see how that goes, with both parties being able to at the end say yes or no, or enduring it. Or you can actually reject a request. And again, I keep saying this word request. It's not a given, it's a request as part of that process. But what's really important with the rejection is that actually you've got, and though I've only got 7 here, it's actually 8 because we've combined one together. You've actually got these reasons here as to why you can actually reject a flexible working request, but it's got to come with reasons. So the one that's combined together there, which is flexible working, will affect quality and performance. They can be a separate thing. So when thinking about flexible working requests and then going through that process, these would be legitimate reasons as to why you would turn down that request. And again, a lot of it will come down to the nature of the arguments that are made and the different nature of the business and the role. It's not just a one thing across everyone. It is about actually being able to say, well, I can only deal with what I can deal with in front of me. So it's very important to make sure that if you do reject a flexible working request, that it's down for one of these reasons. It's always put down in writing, and when rejected, we always give the right to appeal against the decision as well as part of that. So like a lot of things in HR, process. Right, cheap attempt at a joke. Hybrid working, it's the word. What is it? Well, my spelling and grammar is terrible, so I always see it as high birdie. So that's why I've just put it's a birdie without its H. Cheap joke. What is hybrid working? Well, it's a flexible style of working which involves both workplace attendance and remote working. So some days may be spent in at home, they might be fixed or flexible depending on the needs of the business, and some days obviously working in the office. Obviously, because we've been doing a lot of working from home, we can style this as hybrid working, though I think the reality of it is that it doesn't obviously fit everyone and might obviously not be the appropriate thing going forward, but it is such a buzzword at the moment, and more people are saying, well, why can't I undertake, or why can't I work from home? Why doesn't the business implement a hybrid working process? And I think just to be sort of really clear, you need to make as the business owner the decision as to whether it can actually work for you or not. And if it can, how's it going to work? Because some of the cons of working under a hybrid model is that for people that have known each other for a long time in a team, they can work well wherever or whenever they are, but getting new people in can be quite a challenge. Doing inductions and training people and trying to mentor them, how's that going to work if you're undertaking hybrid working? Where you have issues in terms of trying to get meetings done, face-to-face meetings, etc., that can obviously have an impact. And I think there's obviously been some issues already highlighted with people implementing hybrid working. Has been the FOMO, the fear of missing out. That someone said, oh, I can't be in for this meeting, it'll be virtual. No, you've got to be here. It starts to cause some of that conflict around managing people. You may have obviously changed your working space already to kind of have people back. Is it actually going to work if you did implement that hybrid working process? And people coming and going all the time, it may be difficult obviously to be able to see if people are under pressure or maybe struggling to deal with things. So it really does need a lot of consideration as to thinking of, can it actually work for you? I mean, the positives from it, of course, is that if less people are coming in, or people do start work more from home, there is a case for downsizing. So there's a cost process, but I appreciate that's not as easy as just, thanks very much for the lease, Mr. or Mrs. Landlord, we'll just give that back and move on. In the jobs marketplace at the moment, I think we've certainly seen that the flexibility in the working style has proved quite a high benefit that people are looking for. So it can obviously mean that you can attract certain job seekers, improve satisfaction, and may actually help with job retention, or employee retention as well. And there is an argument to say, well, can hybrid working increase productivity, because people are obviously given autonomy on their working location, so they may be more happier, and thus they could be more productive. But again, that comes down to your own business circumstances as part of it. I mean, just to kind of say, other alternatives to hybrid working, that idea of literally changing to that model of at home and workplace, could be, you create more of a flexible hours process. You change, start and finishing times to help on. You condense people's hours. There are other options to consider, other than just suddenly jumping into a hybrid model of work, just because either everyone's talking about it or you're feeling pressured to do so as well. For example, just even here in our workplace, we've all actually just agreed that we are just going to do 1 day a week from home. Fix it. That's the day, 1 day a week from home. If you need to go and see a client, you need to go and see a client, doesn't matter. You're just shifting that responsibility from us to them as part of that process. So as I said, what is it? It's about the flexibility in the workplace requirement, being in work or remotely, but it does come with some huge things to think about. And if you are, I guess, an enthusiast for thinking about hybrid, just to give you some of the things to think about in terms of contract changes, probably think about having a trial period for this. The ability to be able to end the provision of home working if it's not working out, and process of consultation. You'll need to define a new place of work, obviously, split between the two. You'll need to think about how we're clear about the hours that we're doing, the breaks that they need to take, the ability to be able to access, for example, people's home to recover maybe equipment or undertake health and safety checks, and the requirement of them to attend the workplace at certain times, certainly in regards to things like training, meetings, internal and external. Issues, obviously, again, with people working from home in terms of equipment and insurances. And also, I guess, something that I'm sure everyone is very conscious about when people are shifting between one place and the other, about data protection and confidentiality provisions as well, which is an important part of that process. One of the bigger issues, I think, as well, about anything in terms of hybrid working is going to be actually understanding what that concept of it is. It might not be suitable for every role within your business as well. So there could be a situation where we've got some who can work hybrid, some who have not. So that needs to be taken into account. Also thinking about, I'm waiting for this to kind of happen, so especially with someone permanently working from home, where they move, and they move considerably further away but still want to retain their job. I'd love to be working in Thailand, by the way. It'd be great, sat by the beach, giving you all advice, doing Zoom, but difficult to come in for a meeting if we need to do that. So again, defining where that workplace is really, really important. Having a model that obviously managing remote workers in and out is quite a challenge as well, both from, obviously, as we said, from that inducting and also from that ongoing management. And I think if you do move to that model, or thinking about it, of course, it is going to have a change on that culture as well, and that's something to take into account. And again, have they got all the required equipment they actually need in order to actually undertake the duties at home and at work? And I say this quite lightly, but it could actually become quite a faff in respect of those types of things as well. So you need to think about those careful. But look, it's a big buzzword at the moment. It's certainly something that's people are looking for in terms of being attracted to jobs. So if you are thinking about implementing a hybrid working model, there are a lot of things to consider, not only just from an employment law perspective, but also from a general operational perspective. So don't jump into it lightly. Take some advice, talk about it, and gain the opinions of your staff as well. As I said, I'd love to be sat on a beach in Thailand doing everything, but the other risk that we have at the moment is people obviously going on holiday. Alistair was telling us about looking for a holiday locally, or even slightly further than Bournemouth. And everyone that's obviously looked for a holiday has already got one. You need to take 10 times the price for something that's pretty not nice as part of that process. So we do know that obviously most people will be trying to holiday around the UK, but I do think it's really important just at this point still to say people who are going abroad, or employers going abroad, I don't think it's unreasonable for you to ask them where they're going, because I think the point around our own safety in our workplace is obviously if we've got someone who's returning from, I don't know, an amber or red list place, they obviously have the requirement to quarantine. And okay, someone may be able to work from home, fine. But it's whether you want them to, of course, or not. They may have to take additional holiday to cover that quarantine period as well. So a 7-day holiday suddenly becomes a 2-3 week holiday. Is that acceptable to you? But I do think it is reasonable to ask where they're going and outline those risks as part of that process. And again, with all of these things, COVID or not, those normal holiday rules about if someone requests, and again it comes back to that point, requests holiday, and you're unable to fulfill that, what we have to do is put it in writing to say that they're unable to take those days and offer them another opportunity to take it at another point. So it's just something that, given that we're on green, amber and red lists and everyone's looking for a holiday in Cornwall at the moment, I think it's just important to recognise that is also going to be one of the predominant features of things going forward, about if people do want to go abroad, there will be some of those issues that come with it as well. Right, that's my whirlwind tour through COVID protocols, through communication, some of the other issues, and also hybrid working. And if anyone wants to take me on holiday to Thailand, they're most welcome to as well. Does anyone have any questions?
We've got 2 questions in the chat, Tom. The first one, why can't we just have everyone back if the government doesn't lift restrictions on the 21st of June?
And it comes down to your business risk. Nothing obviously stops us legally from entering a workplace, but I think what you have is obviously everyone also saying, well, hang on, the government is still saying that I should work from home where possible. I'm perfectly capable of working from home and continuing to do so. I don't feel safe returning. And I think those bits can be some of the most challenging to actually deal with, because they're quite good arguments, really, aren't they? So you've got to be careful in being able to actually respond to people. And if that did come up and you're thinking about it, again, sit down, talk about it, and make those adjustments as part of that process.
Okay. Can you cover the GDPR implications of hybrid working?
Briefly, I think it's going to come down to how you implement your own data protection policies, because GDPR and data protection, not just about our own personal information, but obviously our clients' information. You're the one, unfortunately, as the employer, who also has those responsibilities to ensure that people's personal information, client information, is stored securely. One of the things that you often obviously have in a workplace is obviously, first of all, the systems, but also maybe even physical things to be able to store sensitive information. How do you create that in someone's back office, bedroom, etc.? That is one of the big challenges, and that might actually be one of the prohibitive things that means that hybrid working actually as a model wouldn't work for a business going forward. So as much as I'd love to go through 101 reasons for GDPR and DPA, if anyone wants to talk to me separately about that, I'm more than happy to, but it will be quite complicated. conversation.
What if an employee does refuse to return? Can we sack them?
Yeah, I had that one a few times. I would say, come back to that point I said about being considered. And that's why trying to get all of these ducks in a row, first of all, about your plan, about how you're going to communicate it to people and the steps that you are taking to make the workplace secure, supportive, etc., are all the reasons why we'd want to have a rational and open conversation with that employee about why they don't want to return to work. I wouldn't rush to just say thanks very much for all the employment, wish you all the best, but unless there is a reasonable belief in a legitimate health and safety concern, we try and explore all the other options prior to making that decision. So again, to sound like a broken record, take some qualified advice if you do have someone raising those concerns.
Tom, I've got a question for you. Now you're getting nervous. You agree a hybrid model of working with a member of staff, and they agree to work from home on set days, a bit like what you guys have done. On these days you will work from home, and on these days you'll work from the office. Yeah. A day you're scheduled to be at home, you're needed for a client meeting.
Yeah.
I assume you have the right to override what your previous agreement was and say, sorry, you have to get in the office because you have to be in attendance at this client meeting.
Yeah, and that, in fairness, Alistair, be one of those things that drawing up the correct contractual changes, the correct policy, we would want to retain that right to do so, because ultimately it is a benefit to have hybrid working, as I said, about the attraction, retention, etc. as well. But fundamentally, it's got to be about, does it work for the business? And certainly for you guys in the professional services, if someone wasn't able to then come in because they're, well, hang on, we're just substituting one of the other, you're needed at the office for those days, and it's a reasonable request as part of that process. So
I guess it's making sure that when you agree the hybrid model of working at the first instance, you almost agree the T's and C's at that point as well, and you leave yourself open to having an override.
Absolutely. But also as well, if you were going in that situation where actually this is a model that you as the business want to implement, there's an element of consultation with the staff, of course, because actually you are changing their terms and conditions. You know, you're actually saying, well, your base of work is going to be wherever. As part of that, you're going to be changing the dynamic of that working relationship, but also the contract of employment. So there's obviously an element of consultation that someone also realistically, oh, by the way, we're doing hybrid working going forward. Well, what happens when someone says, well, no, I want to be in the office 5 days a week? So that's what I'm saying. It's not a rush to get into these things. It's actually what's going to benefit the business and what's going to benefit the people we employ as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for their attention. I hope that was useful and some tips and things shared. There's plenty of mileage in a lot of this, and come Monday we might be editing this significantly to change the advice. But if anyone does have any questions about returning to work or even things like hybrid, we're always more than happy to have that chat.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, for doing that for us. Much appreciated.
No problems.
Thank you, Tom.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Take care, guys.
See you later.
Thank you very much.